To give us more perspective on this, we're being joined by retired Colonel Rich Outzen, who's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Colonel Outzen had served in the United States Department of State as both a military and also as a civilian advisor. Colonel Outzen, thank you very much indeed, sir, for taking time out and speaking to us here on WION. Let me begin by asking you this. You know, the much anticipated interim order by the International Court of Justice is out, where the court in no uncertain terms has said that Israel must do all it can to ensure that genocide is not committed. Do you think Israel will now change its strategy? Will we see the Israeli offensive losing a bit of its intensity, or will Israel continue to do the same as what it has been doing for all these days?
Well, Mohammed, it's good to be with you. Thank you for having me. You know, it's an interesting and a curious ruling in a sense, because both South Africa that launched the case and Israel are sort of claiming a vindication or victory from this initial decision. On the one hand, Israel says, well, they didn't order us to stop, which is true. For that reason, I don't think they will stop, because all the statements from Israeli political and military leaders indicate that their goals include further reducing the control in southern Gaza of Hamas. That means their military infrastructure, their tunnels and whatnot, to the level that they've done in the northern part of Gaza. Yet South Africa says, look, because you were ordered to take certain measures to avoid genocide, it legitimizes or vindicates the idea that there is a risk of genocide and that certain genocidal acts have been or may possibly be committed. So both sides sort of found something to like, or at least are spinning it that way from the decision. But
right.
I do think until the operational plans that Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli military leadership, the security cabinet, have enunciated, which is to remove Hamas's ability to launch terror attacks or military operations from the southern part of Gaza, until that's completed, they're not going to withdraw their troops. Now, they will, in my opinion, have to be a little more careful about the impact on civilians of these operations. It's a terribly crowded place. There have been an inordinate amount of civilian deaths. Right. And now this decision shines a big spotlight on that. So they're going to have to implement more cautions and more precautionary measures and protection measures, let more humanitarian aid in, but I don't think they'll stop.
All right, interesting observations. But let me also read out to you what the South African Foreign Minister, Naledi Pandor, has said. She says that she's not disappointed with this order because in exercising the International Court of Justice's order, there will have to be a ceasefire. There's no way around it. So for this order to be implemented, Israel must comply with the ceasefire. Do you agree with that?
I don't. If you look at the text of the decision, it calls for measures, every possible measure to be taken by Israel to allow more humanitarian assistance into the Gaza Strip and to provide necessary services or enable them to be provided, to protect civilians from genocidal acts, and to provide a report by the end of the month on what steps they've taken to do that. None of that requires, per se, a ceasefire. I think Israel can make a claim at the end of the month when it files its report that it has allowed more trucks in, that it has changed its targeting procedures, various things it can do without actually halting operations. So I would disagree with the respected minister.
All right, now you are a military person, you're a retired colonel. Now tell us in terms of how you look at things progressing from here militarily. Now this order is in place. Now Israel will have to comply with this order. But do you expect the intensity of the war and also what is happening to the civilians in the Palestinian enclave, do you think there is going to be a change in the Israeli military tactics? Because so far, 26,000 Palestinians have been killed, and that includes more than 11,000 Palestinian children.
Well, as a military person, these are numbers that make me deeply, deeply uncomfortable. First of all, I don't know any military person who savors the idea of military operations in urban terrain and in crowded places. I think most military people would prefer to see operations only against combatants with no civilians anywhere nearby, because there is no trained military that prefers to see 11,000 dead children, not the Israelis, not the Americans, no one else. We maybe can set the Russians as a special case for what they've done in Ukraine. But by and large, military people are uncomfortable with this sort of thing. And I think now that the world is watching, I think Israel will have to change some of its tactics. I agree with the military logic that Hamas cannot be allowed to maintain rockets and infrastructure of tunnels and things that they currently have. So I personally support the continuation of operations more carefully, but until Hamas no longer poses a threat to Israel, and I think that's probably how the Israelis view it as well.
But do you think the Palestinian civilians will now be safer after this order?
I think incrementally so, but I also think that this campaign, while it will continue for some months, is winding down in intensity. As Hamas loses the ability to fight back as much as it did at the beginning, there will be less of a threat to civilians. Just whatever the Israelis do, this campaign is moving towards an end.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, Colonel Outzen, for joining us and giving us that perspective then.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.